702.
World of Work.
On our World of Work feature today, we are discussing how to negotiate a raise, a salary increase. What do you need to know or even prepare for before asking for a salary increase? Because that can be one of the most daunting conversations to have with your bosses, isn't it, in a professional setting? But if you're preparing enough, if you choose the right timing, that can help you in negotiating effectively. I mean, as an employee, you have to build a strong case for your raise. You have to be clear about so many things, including your desired salary range and approach, even that discussion with confidence and professionalism, right? Understanding how to position your value can make all the difference in achieving the outcome you're seeking for. And I want you to please share how you have asked for a raise before, and did it work? Did it not work? Have you ever negotiated a raise? And what strategies actually worked for you? Or what do you wish you had done differently? Maybe you've got some strategies that worked for you and you can give some tips to some of our listeners who are thinking about how to approach that salary increase conversation. You can share those thoughts with us or tips on 011-883-0702. You can also send us your WhatsApp voice notes on 072-702-1702. Boniwe Dunster is an HR specialist joining us on the line who's going to guide us through this conversation. Boniwe, welcome back to the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to the 702 listeners.
So, asking for a raise, asking for that salary increase is can be so toxic, taxing, and it can really take a lot for you as an employee. Especially when you don't know, okay, how do I actually position myself, my value for the company? How much am I asking for? What's my reference point? So let's just start with how important it is to prepare thoroughly before asking for a raise. Because I think a lot of us think it's a matter of just sending an email or asking for a meeting with your boss, and you walk in there and you say, I deserve a 20% increase. But it needs preparation, doesn't it?
Yes, it does require preparation, Clement, because it actually ends up being a negotiation meeting, and it's also about a give and take to try to actually find a win-win situation. So you can't go into that conversation without having prepared. What's important firstly is for you to understand why are you requesting for the raise, and is it the right time for you to actually request for the raise? And the reason I'm saying why, probably you have had an increase of workload, or the complexity of your role has expanded, or probably you've completed a successful project, and maybe that project has saved the company money or millions, right? And in that instance, you feel that you have worked so hard to get to that point, and therefore you believe that what you have achieved requires you to be actually compensated, more than what you currently are because of your value, the skills that you have learned, and so forth, right? In certain instances, especially in your IT spaces, you might obtain a certain certification, which is quite important, and therefore that actually changes your value in the market. So that is the why that you need to understand. Now that you understand the why, it's actually to saying, how do I do my research to be able, to support the request that I'm making? And that goes as far as having to do research in terms of understanding what is my company paying for this particular role, what is the market paying for this particular role, and what is the specific industry that I am in pay for this particular role. And we know that most of the time such data is not readily available. However, there are, bodies that you can actually engage with to try to get that level of information. For example, All Mutual runs a RAM channel where they do annual benchmark on certain roles every year. The 21st Century does the same. Sometimes you can even ask recruitment agencies or your HR friends or professional bodies if you do prepare, or if you belong to a professional body. And then what that entails is that you take that data and then you analyze it and you see to say, this is what is happening and these are the trends. So as part of your preparation, you actually then go into that meeting having prepared to understand, to say, this is where I am as an individual, this is the qualifications that I have, this is what I have done, this is what the market, is paying, or my peers are being paid in line with, this kind of role. And also you need to support that also with performance as well, Clement. I think that's important to highlight, because if you're a non-performer or are not delivering on your work, your conversation will not even go past an introductory, minute of your conversation, because you need to also support that with performance as well, so that the organization can also understand and consider the value that you're bringing into the organization for them to give you that adjustment. So never forget your achievements. In essence, this is what I've achieved, this is what I've done, this is what I have exceeded and went beyond and above. So that is very important, because that forms a strong basis for you to have a meaningful and a mature conversation with your line manager.
Okay, so we must document those achievements and our contributions, because that they must then guide that conversation with our managers. How do we, though, Boniwe, research and maybe even determine an appropriate salary range before those negotiations? Because again, one of the mistakes we make is that we get in there and we say, yeah, I deserve a 20%, or I need 5,000 rand more of an increase. And when your manager, your boss asks, okay, how did you get to that number? Some of us can't really explain that.
Yes, and this is where the data that you would have gathered from your REM channels, the professional bodies that you work, that you belong to, or the agencies that probably, you're on their database. So this is actually where your research, comes in. So when you answer that particular question, you can go as far as, this is the research that I have done, this is the REM channel annual benchmark that was published on the Old Mutual site, and my role as a financial accountant, this is how it's paid in line with the people that are in the financial services, or it's paid in line with the industry that we're in, because sometimes there's market, and then there's also industry as well, because where your industry is also is a contributing factor. So you need to bring that into the conversation to show the person that you're engaging with or that you're asking this from to say, I have done my homework, because as soon as you stumble and are unable to actually provide an answer to that question of saying, but how much do you want and how did you get to that figure? So it is important for you to indicate how you actually then got to that figure. And then by doing that, you say, based on what the market is paying and based on where I am. So this is the gap between where I am. This is the gap between where I am and where the market is. And I would actually ideally like to be, to be placed where the market, recommends, whether it's at the 25th percentile of the band or wherever. And then you do that. But when you are also negotiating, also be careful of just, sticking to a figure. I think it's important to probably give a range to say, if all fails, this is where I want to land. But if, in an ideal situation where I was given a blank check, this is as how high I would go. So give that range so that when your employer considers your request, it is then between you and actually, those ranges, so that when they fall below, they can actually fall at your lowest request of the money, because if you actually give them a single figure, it becomes difficult. But if you give them a range, then you can play and negotiate between the ranges that you have actually then provided. But just make sure that you are also reasonable and you are asking what is in line with what would be expected if you were to get another role or a similar role in another company.
Okay. 011-883-0702. I want to hear from you as well. How have you negotiated a raise before? What strategies have actually worked for you? Give some tips to some of our listeners, please. Or maybe your strategy didn't work, but you have actually reflected and you found ways that you can do it differently. What are you now considering? Your WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702.
Hey, morning, Clems. When asking for a raise, you must know your bosses, right? Because I know personally where I used to work, whereby every single time you ask for a raise, the boss would get angry and perform just so that you become scared to come back and ask for a raise again or anything like that. So the best thing to do is get there, speak your case. When they start acting and performing like a crazy person, just take it as a sign that you will never get it and just go look for a job somewhere else and be happy. Yeah. cook some Devland.
Yeah, all right, Kicks, thank you. Another one, anonymous on the WhatsApp line says, good morning, Clement, to you and Boniwe. If your manager resigns and he's earning double your salary and you are promoted to take his role, can you ask to get the same salary as his? That is 100%, because that would be then 100% salary increase. Yeah, Boniwe?
Yeah, so maybe let me start with the second question first. So with the second question, in many circumstances, you would not get identical to what your manager was earning. The reason being that person would have been at that particular role for a period of time, probably 5-6 years. So they have actually then moved with the role in terms of the of the salary tables moving annually. And it will also depend in when they actually assumed the role. Maybe they would have assumed the role, as a fully qualified individual. So it also depends on where you are versus the role that you are going to. So in essence, if you're moving from where your boss was, the role that your boss was occupying, they would look into that particular salary band from where you are in terms of the adjustment. Many companies would actually, those that actually follow or have some remuneration principles, they would often place the new incoming candidate at the 25th percentile of that, of that salary scale. And then you find that as you move into the role and you grow into the role, then you move, eventually you'll get, at the 50th percentile of that scale. And again, the honest truth, which is also not ideal, is that when it's somebody internal, the increase sometimes tend to be, lesser. Maybe they would give you like something between 10 and 15%. But if it's an external candidate, they might actually also get higher depending on where they are coming from. Because in that instance, remember, as an employer, you are also buying a skill from the market. You're buying a ready-made skill from the market. Whilst internally, sometimes you promote somebody into the role whilst they still have developmental areas to meet before they become fully competent. And with certain promotions and with fair practices, you can actually then communicate that to someone to say, we are promoting you, but these are the gaps that have been identified. Therefore, we will have a 6-month review or an annual review for the next coming 2 to 3 years to get you fully competent. And at each review process, there would be certain adjustments that are made to your salary to get you to where you are supposed to be. But that only happens in where processes are open and fair to people.
Okay. And then is it recommended to practice maybe some role playing of that negotiation conversation beforehand?
I think it is so, because you also want to get into that conversation with some level of confidence, right? So if you have somebody that you trust, maybe you've got an accountability partner or you've got a mentor or somebody that you trust in your family or your friends, you can actually then be open to them in terms of the process that you're about to embark on, and then ask them for input and ask them to actually play that role of a manager or HR, and then you are on the other side, so they can also poke, your presentation, or they can poke, your request, so that you can go back and prepare. And this even means maybe standing in front of the mirror and pretending that you're talking to someone else, because oftentimes it's a very scary process, right? And people do get anxious, so you don't also want to get into that room, bite your tongue, start sweating, and you can't even articulate yourself. So preparation is actually quite important, and having to present your case before someone else who can actually give you honest feedback for you to go rework your presentation, I believe is actually quite important. And added to that, it is also important for you to prepare to say, if the company says no, what are the next steps? Because that is a possibility, right? With all your level of preparation, it doesn't mean that it is guaranteed that they're going to say yes. But if they say no, you also need to prepare, how am I going to take the no? And that goes back to, to maturity, and resilience, to say, how do I bounce back from that no? And also making sure that when that no comes, you start negotiating other benefits, right? You might have said no on the salary, but what are the other benefits that you can actually request for? In certain instances, you can even ask for company shares. In certain instances, you can even ask, for a hybrid working model, which others might not actually have as part of your benefits. So you need to also have an option to say, what are other benefits that I can negotiate in case that I do not get the money that I am requesting for? And also keep the lines of communication open after that no. Just don't be despondent. Also ask to say, okay, is this a definite no, or is this a no that you can renegotiate after 6 months or after a year? And then you put your line manager on the spot with accountability and ask to say, if I want to come back and request for this after a year, what is it that I need to work on in terms of my professional development, in terms of my technical and personal skills? What is it that it would take for me, to actually get that increase when I come back next time to ask, so that they don't exonerate themselves from the process. And if they say it's in 6 months' time on this particular day, you go back and you actually put that conversation in the calendar so that you reschedule it, so that you don't lose sight of the conversation.
Another person on the WhatsApp line says, "Hey Clement, Boniwe, can you please get Boniwe to respond to this question? How easy is it to get these salary benchmark reports? I've been looking to get them, but I've really been struggling." That's a question there from Mongani.
Yeah, sometimes it's actually not as easy, but Rem Channel is easy because Rem Channel, they actually do publish it. So if you can just Google go to Google and just put in Rem Channel, you should, because that they actually publish. If you also belong to a professional body, because professional bodies, they also do their annual researches as well. Because if you belong to a professional body, it means there's a membership fee that you also pay every year. Then you can go to a professional body and say, I'm requesting for this particular benchmark on this particular role because of what, and they should be able to provide. Some of them would be available, but they would be available at a fee, because those are private and independent consultants that actually embark on this work.
Okay, here's another WhatsApp voice note.
Hi, Clement. So I just wanted to share my experience. When I moved jobs the last time around, I went through a negotiation process with the employer, and obviously it didn't go as expected. And the feedback that was received at the time was that I was already above the salary scale. For some weird reason, it looks like they'd forgotten that they were actually very transparent in terms of their earnings. And within about 4 months, I got hold of the salary scale, and I decided right then and there that I was entering the job market. And behold, a month later, I had left, and I am happy to say that position is currently still vacant. I think there are some employers, from an ethical point of view, just don't deserve good employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Boniwe?
I think that, it's actually quite sad, when there is lack of authenticity in terms of these conversations. Yes, there are sometimes, employees that might actually be sitting, above the salary band, which makes it difficult, for those huge increases. But I think the dishonesty is actually unacceptable, because you are lying to your people, so they will never trust your process again. But oftentimes people must be able to sit within a salary band, and a decision should be made within that, salary band. And you can even, share salary band. It's just that it's a practice that is not, common or normal, in our country or actually in the world, whereby we share salary bands. Because in other organizations, they would actually not share the entire salary band, but they will actually share with employees the salary band of the role or the level that they are, so that you can see how far you are, in terms of, of the band, am I below, am I in the midpoint, and all of that. But in instances whereby, you keep on negotiating and you keep on giving good performance and you're giving good results, and you are always met with resistance or a no to the previous WhatsApp voice note, then you are more than welcome to also then start going to the market, to validate your worth. Because sometimes we need to get to a point of saying, with the environment that I'm working in, with the culture that I see, with what has happened with some of the high talent in the organization, my chances of actually getting a proper and an equitable, adjustment might not, happen. But then again, you also find other organizations that will actually have their annual increases, but they will also have ad hoc increases, probably around about March or October, depending on when, their annual increases are. And during that process, what they do, they would send each and every department their people, their headcount file, including their salaries, and also indicating how far they are, from their salary band. I think I've worked for a company that did that diligently, whereby we were mandated to make sure that people that were paid below a certain percentile, we always bring them up, so that they do not fall outside outside the pay scale, because that's an unfair, labor practice, and we're also talking about equal pay for equal work. So what is it that you are doing to actually ensure that your people are remunerated competitively, in the market? I applaud that guy for leaving, but it was also unfair for the company to also lie. And it is easy for them to lie because such information is actually held, as a secret. And that being a secret, for me personally, as an HR person, it also perpetuates the past injustices, where we can actually then allow, for these huge parities between, racial pay parities, gender pay parities, and so forth.
Yeah. Here's another one.
Peter Townsend, the management expert who took Avis Rent-A-Car to number 2 in the world, wrote a book called Up the Organization. And in there, his comment on salaries and salary increases was that if you don't succeed in your negotiation discussion with your boss and the team, resign and then apply for your own position. That, in his view, gets management to sit back and have a look at the reality of the cost of replacing you. And he said if the company says their policy is they don't re-employ people who resigned, move on, find a good company. Thanks, guys. Good chat. Lawrence from the East Rand.
Thanks, Lawrence. That can be complicated. Boniwe?
That can be complicated because there are people in their companies, Clement, that are very arrogant, right? They don't even know what the cost of recruitment is. They don't even break it down to say, if we're recruiting for this job, how many rounds of interviews, number of panel members, what is their salary per hour, what is the training cost of actually upskilling this person, for them to climatize the culture and all of those things. All of that is a cost, but there are companies or individuals that are so arrogant that they don't even know the cost and they don't even care. Unless probably then you resign, but you're making sure that you actually already have something that you're going to go to, because sometimes you might do that and they might not even come back to you with with a counter offer to retain you, right? They might not even be interested, and sometimes you might resign. You find out your manager has been wanting to get rid of you. So I think it's an intricate, balancing act, for individuals when they decide to actually leave in case so that they can get a salary adjustment. But going to the market to validate your worth, it's also good. But maybe then your work is actually with another company and not the company that you have been with for 15 years.
Yeah. Boniwe, always, you've been great as always. Thank you so much for guiding us through this conversation. Boniwe Dunster is an HR specialist. That takes us to 11:30.